Hello again, welcome. My name is Nancy Weber and I'm on the board, actually both of AAA and APEC North Bay. But it's my pleasure and great honor to introduce you to the filmmaker of Exile, Dr. Pollie Bith-Melander. Dr. Pollie was born in Cambodia and immigrated to the United States at the age of 10 years old. She had firsthand experience of trauma related to the experiences of war and migration, but grew up to become an amazing researcher, educator, mentor, and counselor for many who suffer from war-related trauma. Dr. Pollie is a medical anthropologist and the program director and chair of the social work department at California State University Stanislaus. She conducts research in Southeast Asia and in the United States with focus on ethnomedicine, refugees, and community mental health and trauma. Dr. Pollie's research and services take her all over the world, at one point as part of a military deployment in Afghanistan. Recently, she was part of a research project on effects of burn pits, Agent Orange, and other toxic substances, and the publication possibly contributed to the passing of the PACT, P-A-C-T, Act in 2022 that expanded health care and benefits for veterans who were exposed to toxic substances. A documentary film on this project, Slow Burn, is almost done, so she's working on her second film. Dr. Pollie also offers counseling support for children and families suffering anxiety, panic disorder, and PTSD at the Institute for Transformation and Change in Oakland. We're going to have our Q&A here, and we talked about this second part of the series, which is Invisible, which is different than Slow Burn, too. You can explain that.
Yes.
You can explain that. We encourage you, everyone, to support Dr. Pollie's fundraising for Invisible. After this Q&A, we also want to show you a little bit of a video of Invisible, the next film.
Part two.
Part two, right? Maybe I'll start with the first question, because this film finished in February 2020. And you left us with the statistic that there are about 1,600 deportations still active at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly, Soup, in February 2020, his case was still pending.
And you're curious to know what happened,
Very curious.
right?
Yes, very curious. And I hope we don't have to wait till part two to find out.
Definitely not. It's going to be about a woman whose husband was deported. So that sort of take us back to Southeast Asia, specifically Cambodia. So in February 2022, the end of 22, he actually got his case vacated, and then just recently got his citizenship. And had 2 more sons. Moved with his longtime girlfriend, and they live actually in San Francisco. Yeah, so it's a happy ending. It wasn't at the time when the film was completed.
So do we have questions from the audience?
I understand that you work with the Asian Law Caucus. Is it the one in San Francisco? Asian Law Caucus?
I don't work with them. We interview them for the film, but also because of the situation. This was toward midway through the Trump administration, when there was sort of an intensity of deportation, right? Detention and deportation. So part of my advocacy work was basically doing a lot of referrals. And then, of course, fighting for those who, like Sue. It was such a strange circumstance. I think it was like, I remember 83 of them were reported in the Bay Area. And then all of a sudden, normally they would like interview you and then they let you go, and all of a sudden they all were detained. And Sue was the only one who was let go. Now, I can't tell you because I don't have consent from him. But I can tell you because if they didn't let him go, he wouldn't have made it. I mean, it's life and death for him. So, yeah. So of those 83 that were detained, I think they all were deported because I couldn't track them. I think I was only able to track one all the way to Battambang, Cambodia, and that was it.
Oh, I see. So Asian Law Caucus is not 100% involved in doing deportation process.
What they do is they take case by case, so they do referrals, they take case by case, and then they fight based on case by case.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And they did, during that time, they did have a program specifically to address Southeast Asian refugee detention and deportation.
The Khmer Rouge, Who were they? What nationality? What? I don't know anything about that.
So, oh, that's a long story. How many hours do I have? I'm going to crunch it to less than 30 seconds.
Yes.
So they're initially the Khmer's rock. They started as nationalists fighting for freedom. Cambodia used to be colonized by France, and the goal was basically to liberate the country. But unfortunately, from there onward, they sort of morphed when basically during the Vietnam War, a little bit pre-Vietnam War, they morphed into, so some of the old timers from the Khmer's rock, the nationalist movement, morphed or recruited into the Khmer Rouge. They're essentially a communist group. Now, interestingly, their leaders were sent by the monarchy during that time to go and educate in France. So when they returned home, of course, armed with education, they decided that that's what they were going to do, take the country back to year zero. So what happened was, during the Vietnam War, Cambodia tried really hard to maintain neutrality, and it felt like almost overnight where the US government did an internal coup d'etat in the National Assembly and then installed their backup Cambodian by the name of Marshal Lano to take over and therefore succumb to the US power, right? And then fell, the neutrality piece fell and then became sort of a place where the US used to land and engage war with Vietnam. And during that time, because of the weakening, right, you can't really have a foreign educated, live abroad, although native Cambodian, or ethnic, not native, but ethnic Cambodian ruling a country that they are not familiar with. So it's the weakening of the National Assembly, the weakening of the royal family who try to maintain neutrality. As a result of that, the Khmer Rouge, which essentially is a communist group, took the opportunity because of the weakening of the government, Cambodian government, and of course, abruptly the US pull out, right? When they pull out, they just kind of like conveniently pull out, and overnight they just took over.
I have one comment and two questions. Comment number one, when the Vietnam War started, you were 10 years old.
Oh,
and,
no, I was not 10 minutes, I understood.
Okay, but anyway, so you mean that the US bombing Cambodia, at that time, we were told that the Cambodian tried to stay neutral, allow the communist movement into South Vietnam. So that's what they decided to bomb that area. So the whole other side of the world know that there were invasion to Cambodia at the time. But I was in the war. I crossed the border several times at the time. That's my thing that I know common. The second question is, when Pol Pot killing field, are they pick and choose who they kill, or they kill everyone they see? Because I understand Pol Pot have the idea they want to preserve the pure Cambodian who have to have curly hair, dark skin. If the people have light skin or straight hair, it's not considered pure Cambodia, so they kill. The third question I have, Vietnam, when they came to Cambodia and take out the Pol Pot regime, they claim that they liberate Cambodia. They are not invaded. I'm not trust them, but that's what they said.
Okay. We have different lenses,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's a bit of a long, complex history. Your first question, whether ethnic cleansing did occur, whether the phenotype, as you mentioned, appearance, right? Dark skin, curly hair. I'm not sure about the curly hair part, but if you look at Cambodian appearance, they tend to be a bit darker skin compared to the neighboring countries those who sort of have Chinese-related population or groups that migrated to that part of the world. Of course, you see a lighter skin, right? But having said that, what the Khmer Rouge was trying to do was basically taking a country back to roughly 15th century, during the Angkorean period, right, the early part of the civilization, where Cambodia was literally, half of Vietnam and half of Thailand belonged to an Angkorean period. And that was perceived to be a very glorious moment in Cambodian history. And that's where the Khmer Rouge wanted to take the country back, and truly believed that to do that, you've got to get rid of anything that seems being a part of the colonizer, right? You remember my friends colonized Cambodia. And then of course foreigners, right? Chinese, Vietnamese, and people who wear glasses because they're considered rebels. If you're educated, then you're not easily persuadable. That's what they were trying to do, really to eliminate class-based society and took it back to agrarian society, of peasant-based society. And with regard to the invasion versus liberation, I'll leave it at that.
I really appreciate the film you are doing. We think of some kind of solidarity because the Vietnamese people is suffering from the war also. So let's please take up the word invasion.
Okay. You're entitled to your perspective, right? Okay.
I'm just wanting to find out a little bit more when you talk about mental health and trauma. Are you connected with people who is actually in Cambodia? Because we have so much resources here. Those people who are, left behind.
Yes, Facebook created this instant, right, community, virtually and otherwise. Again, when it comes to mental health services and support, stigma, just like API community here, stigma is a huge issue, right? Acts as a barrier. And also shame and guilt, right? And even to this day, I don't think we have a proper word to describe mental support in the Cambodian language because it tends to go toward a little bit more of very derogatory, right? Unless you can call somebody crazy and then they go and see a crazy expert, right? So it doesn't really translate very well. So that's one thing. The other thing is that those who were, let me backtrack a little. During the Pol Pot regime, right? Most of the male, the husbands, brothers were killed, right? So you have a lot of female, but that generation, they were my mother's generation. They're in their late 80s and early 90s, and most of them have passed on already. So the direct trauma that's impacting as a result of the Vietnam War and the Pol Pot regime, for that generation, most of them have passed on, so they're not around. What is left is the brunt of the experiences from those who experience, and also from complex trauma, right? Transgenerational trauma, trauma passing on from one generation to the next. So you get this kind of trauma. Now, in a country like Cambodia, just like Vietnam and Laos, or maybe Laos is a little less, moving a little bit slower compared to Vietnam, right? And compared to Cambodia, where you see progress just shooting off the roof. If you want to feel capitalism and progress, go to Southeast Asia, you see that. I remember when I was in Vietnam in the 90s, the mid-90s, and of course Cambodia as well. During that time, the Khmer Rouge was still running around trying to destroy villages and hurt people. Compare that period, just the 90s, a little bit before the HIV epidemic covered Southeast Asia, just right before that. The country just sort of emerged from that devastation of war, right, and atrocity, to 2015, 2010, and now it's unrecognizable in terms of progress, right? That development is going so fast. We don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but development is there. And you see progress, you see, unfortunately, I don't know, maybe fortunately, all these restaurant chains, fast food chains, they're there now, right? So I'm hoping when it comes to mental health and support for those who need it, will become normalized at some point, but right now I can see it. There is a social work department that conferred a master's degree in social work at the University of Phnom Penh. I'm close to the colleagues there, I'm close to a research institute there as well. But you can feel that even the focus is not really on mental health. It's more of human rights abuse, right? Which is rightly so, because social work in this country is about social justice. Why? Because of our history. But in that part of the world, it's about human rights abuse.
Would you be doing something really at ground zero that side? Or you're going to start here and, I don't know, I'm just thinking because these are repercussions of the war.
I used to do a lot of work in specifically Cambodia, right? Not just research, but literally do a lot of the training and even case assessments and things like that, writing report for the Ministry of Health, for example, making recommendations, and then provide training to experts there. But, as part of academia, my goal is basically to link and really create some kind of international programs where, for example, the University of Phnom Penh, through the Department of Social Work, they do confer a master's degree as to whether their level of training and expertise is the same as the US. I tend not to think so. Let me just, no, I'm gonna get myself in trouble again, so let me shut up about that part. But I think that the quality in the US, especially in a state school like ours, right, California State University, we have accreditation body that actually look and enforce to ensure quality and core competency, right? Yeah. And it's this kind of training, although it's gonna take a long time, but to be able to provide that kind of training in the country and hoping that it will take time, that eventually it will lead to something a bit better than what it is now. More acceptance, right? That people understand what it is. And maybe there's that mind and body connection. And we know that stress causes all kinds of problems. It's not just psychological and emotional, right? Because cortisol, I mean, the double of all double, cause inflammation. Inflammation leads to all kinds of problems, right? So it's not just psychological, and it's not just emotional. So there's the physiological component as well.
My question though is, my sense is that, my hope is, that when the US said yes, come to the United States to Cambodians, that there was somebody sort of in charge of that. And there's someone whose job was to say, okay, maybe not the worst slum in Oakland, say, just as a choice, but maybe keep the refugees together in a neighborhood, or, I don't know, psychological help, job training, anything? Did they promise that and not deliver? Did they think you would just get here and it's America, you'll be fine? I mean,
well, the only thing that I remember from my mom passed away last month. The only thing that I remember from my mom was that she was worried about, because we have to pay back all that expenses when they took us here, like the airfare, tickets,
oh my God.
the ground transportation, all of that were added. It took my mom, I think, close to 2 decades to pay it off. And that's what I remember. With regard to support, all I remember was all these different churches. They would go and try to give us free food, clothes, and here's the part where I need to confess. So here's my confession. I remember as a kid, I was close to being 10 years old when we were literally dumped in a pig house without anyone around and without knowing anyone. And it was late at night. It was at 11 p.m., I believe. And so I was baptized, I think, in a Baptist church because they get free ice cream and clothes. Yeah. I was baptized in a Mormon church because it was such a beautiful place. I can look out and see, and they get free food and free ice cream. And then I was baptized in a Catholic church because I got free food. And then it was great music. So, and my mom was a devout Buddhist. So I can't say that I'm like a Buddhist because I'm more like whatever, right? So, yeah. But that's how we got some support, through churches, through religious organizations.
So you're saying I should be ashamed and outraged.
Just a quick question about, you mentioned you had to repay all the expenses. So when your family was told that they had a way out and a place to go, were finances discussed at that time? Like,
no.
how would you know how much you have to pay back?
You don't. They just send you a statement. They send you like a big fat statement. And I remember my mom goes, what does this mean? And there's a guy, a translator from the church. I can't remember, but one of them, I think it was Baptist because we lived really close to the church. And he said, oh, that is a lot. That's like 20 or something time you're renting right now. And we know our rent. And so, yeah, no, you don't. You just get a statement from whoever, immigration, whoever they are. And they're quite brutal too. Yeah, they charge late fee if you late.
I just wanted to make a comment. They want me to speak Khmer. See how you feel. ខ្ញុំចង់និយាយប្រាប់ថាខ្មែរយើងទៅមកស្រុកអាមេរិកម្នាក់ៗមាន experience ខុសៗគ្នានៅតែកន្លែងដែលគេឲ្យយើងនៅ ដោយបងមានភាសាថាយើងត្រូវ pay government back whatever it is. My mom had to do the same thing for her 5 children. So it's not a lie. Oh, anyway, sorry. I said I just wanted to make comment that whatever she's stating to all of you, it's a factual statement. Because my family came to the U.S. as a refugee, probably the same age as Dr. Pollie. We were here in 1981. The good part is that we came to Sonoma County. And yes, so lucky me, we didn't get down to Oakland, East Oakland, or LA, or Long Beach somewhere. So that's a lot of, or Sacramento, Fresno, Modesto. So you see a lot of that. So even though Cambodian children or family were sent here to Sonoma County in 1981, we do not have any resources whatsoever in regard of that. So I was put, when I went to school, in Monroe School, I have my Vietnamese friend, Lynn, and we have a Vietnamese, we have a Cambodian, we have a Hmongs. They put us together. They think that we speak the same language because we look the same. And we all look at each other like, okay, what are we doing? You know? So that's the experience we had to do. And when my mom had to rent a house, we had to rent in Santa Rosa. There's a part of Santa Rosa that is not okay. It's called Edequai. Now it's an Apple Valley. It still is. A lot of crimes and things like that's happening. So we live there, and then there's robberies and stuff. Sometimes we hear gunshot, and we're like, okay, there goes another nightmare for us, right? And then, but we have a lot more Cambodian family together. So when we went to school, we had to go together as a group just to have self-defense, because a lot of racial slur, you Chinese, you eat dogs, go back to your home, you know, all that. And then our family, which is like, sorry, mom's like, don't fight, you know, whatever it is, don't fight, just walk away. And we're like, okay, you know, it's like, so a lot of that going on as we grew up. So we decided to listen to our parents along with the other Cambodian children. And one day it got to like, you blow up, right? They're like, okay, I'm gonna beat up that child who's, you know. So just to make sure that they don't bother us anymore. So I chased after them. And then after I took action and I told all the Cambodian children not to go home and tell the parents, then I would get whipped. It's like, this is it, just let's see what happens. So that's what happened. So it's just because we are in a gooder side of the you know, it's not pleasant as well. So we have to go through all this process, learning how to survive. So it's nightmare within nightmare within nightmare. And going through college the same way, there's no support. Even the grant that we had to apply for, scholarship, Cambodian children get less scholarship than the Vietnamese children. Okay? And then the bombing in Cambodia, the bombing that happened in Cambodia, each Cambodian family person who bombed and killed, the US only paid $50. Really. So if you want to get political, it's ugly. That's how it goes. So we just do whatever we need to do to survive. And then in hope that the future will be better for the next generation to come. And then hopefully there's a unity of that. And I'm pleased and honored that Dr. Pollie and the other Cambodian scholar or intellectual comes out and makes films, because not a lot of us Cambodian people are out there compared to the other Asian population. It's just like the school where I work in Sonoma County, there's only 2 Cambodian. That was me, my sister and myself in education. And that's it. And again, because of our last name, how we look, we were not recognized as Cambodian. I was Vietnamese for 25 years with the district that I work with. Even though I have children whose parents work for the district knows that I was Cambodian, I'm Cambodian, I told you I'm Cambodian, so put me back, I'm Cambodian. So even that, we're battling. And what you're saying, yes, I agree with you, because all of us who live in Southeast Asia, when it comes to war, we all affected by it. The Vietnamese, the Cambodian, the Laosian, those were the group, and the Hmongs were the low, we can't say ourselves as being low, we were the product of the refugee that American people are not aware. No one was aware of us. They have no idea where we came from, what language we speak, what food we ate, and all we knew, they just sum us as Chinese. That's what we are. We know Kung Fu, we know all of that. So that's how, yes, so it's very intense, but somehow, because of the war that happened, we somehow survived. My family survived because we had 3 days to live. We dug our own grave with the Vietnamese coming in. So I am honored that that's what happened to us. And yes, in Cambodia, it's prosper, but talking about mental health, it's a lot of going on. The generation that grew up in Cambodia have no clue what happened during the Pol Pot regime as well. So the history is not being taught. That's all I wanted to say.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing. I know sometimes some of these things hit us very personally and we become vulnerable, and yet in that vulnerability and sharing, hopefully you feel support and love from this group, because this is community. And it's a community of Asians, Southeast Asians, non-Southeast Asians. We're hoping to create a community that just doesn't look at our faces and our differences. We acknowledge that, but we also want to say there's so much commonality if we could look at our humanity. I actually have a question or two comments. One is, I hear the words Mien, Hmong, and all that, and I really don't have an understanding. And I know some of these are village tribes, but were they also living in Cambodia or Laos or whatever, that they move around? So I was just wondering what the makeup, when you say Cambodian, it's like us saying Chinese, but then we'll say, but I'm Cantonese, I'm Hokkien, I'm Hakka, all these, same thing in the Philippines, it just depends, and then you speak a different dialect. So I was wondering if Cambodia has those, or people kind of just see themselves as Cambodians, as well as maybe native little tribes, and do the Hmongs and the Miens come in, or whatever others. And secondly, kind of tied in with that, as well as a segue with the mental health, is that because we have our own heritage, our own cultural values and perspectives, and our own languages, when you do this mental health counseling, especially with the older generation who have not gotten English skills or even understand this Western model of psychology and counseling, like you were saying, therapy doesn't really exist as therapy as we know it. Have you, how do you begin to incorporate that native cultural heritage, value, and language to help, our own people be able to resolve either that intergenerational trauma, or even what they currently deal with when they have to adjust to this being dumped in East Oakland, or living up in Sonoma? It might not be a dump, but it's still so foreign in many ways. So those are my comments or questions. Thank you.
You just have to come to my class.
All the way in Santa Claus.
But, so interestingly, so Southeast Asia, right? So Laos, you have the Mongolian, they consider them Highlanders, although I think that's derogative, right? And their origins are from China. And then, so Laos, you have a bit more of a mix of indigenous and the Highlanders versus the Lowlander. Cambodia, though, uniquely, is homogenous. So besides the Sino-Khmer, which is Chinese Cambodian or Chinese Khmer, you have more or less, it's homogenous. So then it becomes sort of a class-based society as opposed to ethnic-based. And then it's so obvious, the rest are just sort of foreigner who live there, right? The Chinese are considered foreigner who live there, and then the foreigners who are not Asian or Asian who live there, they're just foreigner, but essentially the majority is homogeneous Khmer. With regard to modalities using in psychotherapy or counseling, what I find, I teach theory in psychology to master's student in social work, and also what they call psychotherapy slash practice models, which essentially looking at different approaches used to do or to conduct psychotherapy sessions. Some of the things that I learned, I'm more of a blend therapist, which means that I look at symptoms and try to understand symptoms and then try to understand the complexity of the situation and the history, the culture, and what have you, and then go from there. Now, I know that cross-cultural model works really well with sort of an emphasis on especially they really focus on oral tradition. So narrative therapy, for example, works really well. You allow people to tell stories, right? And sometimes you use other approaches such as food, right? To encourage storytelling. And through that, you process trauma that way. Or you use art if they're into art, right? Or you use a community. Sometimes it's the community leaders in which that they believe the most, or who has the most influence. And so it isn't really treating an individual or based on an individual versus collective. It's more of a collective approach, right? You try to make sure you tie all the little support system together, have them tell stories. If stigma is an issue, then hey, tell it from a third person perspective. And one of the things I notice when I provide therapy or counseling to older Cambodians, because it's in Cambodian, in Khmer language when I do this, you just allow them to tell story. When it ends, it ends. It doesn't end at 45 minutes or it doesn't end in 1 hour as our, Western modality and showing require us to do. So it's that kind of nuances. And start with, ask them what they want. Right? That is the most important part. If you don't listen, and if you don't follow their goals and objectives, what they think is important to them, you're a useless therapist anyway, or clinician. One of the classes I'm designing now is called Social Work and Happiness. May I say something about that? Because people assume that we're naturally happy. No, we're not. We're all the reverse. We're naturally miserable. Did you notice all your negative experiences stuck with you like no one's business? And think about all your happy moments. Do you remember them? The detail? Like all the negative experiences you have? It's because happiness is not a state of being. It's an increment of time. And you have to feel all these little time with all the happy things you do. Anyway.
So we're going to have Dr. Pollie back for a course on happy habit. We're going to try to do this.
So this is part 2 of Exilia called Invisible, focusing on a woman whose husband was deported. And she was left to raise or rear 3 children alone. Her husband now lives in Phnom Penh. She actually bought him a house. And then, well, it's a long story, but he ended up with a mistress and kicked her out and all that stuff. Yeah. So part 2 is really focusing on in Southeast Asia. But this is just the 30-second of an interview with her. And also, like I said, my second film is about to be done. It's called Slow Burns. If you're interested in veterans, you're interested in knowing what happened with them, I'd be happy to show it here. So, we can have another debut.
I had that opportunity to sit down and think about my self-care. It's just about me just trying to survive, about me trying to make, I guess, my next move, Mm-hmm. I don't know, when I think, like I always tell my husband right now, the time that I'm going to think and take my self-care is probably when I'm dead. That's when I'm going to sit down and think about myself. But right now, it's just do my next move. I don't know what my move is, but it's getting there.
Sounds good.
Okay. this was during COVID, so it's a lot of Zoom, right? And that's what you're getting. And I was trying to hold on to my camera. You see me looking down, that was the camera that didn't work. She wrote some really nice poems and stories. And this is what I mean about narrative therapy, telling stories, right? It's a way to express yourself, a way to process negative emotions.
Dr. Pollie, you said this woman wrote these poems?
Yeah, yes.
Was she ever in Cambodia? Because she makes these references of Cambodia.
She remembered a lot of stuff from her mom.
Oh, from her mom, but
Yeah.
not from her own personal.
She was very young.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
Does she write the poems in English or in Cambodian?
Oh, it's in English. Yeah, it's what she remembers. Can I tell a little story about that market? She would say that if she's worried about getting hurt or getting beat up, she said that was her favorite store to run into, and as long as she's inside, she feels safe.
That's San Francisco.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
potentially.
Yep.
It's still there.
Yeah. Yeah, she grew up in San Francisco, or got dumped in the Tenderloin, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Are these stories and poems in a book or not yet?
Not yet.
Not yet, but it's in the plans.
In the film, yeah. I mean, what is so interesting about experiences and memories, right? You think you remember something, it could be your experiences, and there's certain experiences you think it's from your memory, from listening to someone else, and that was her case, because she was quite young. So what she remembers, she might have experienced, and vice versa.
Did she write all these after her husband? This is the lady whose husband was deported, right?
Yes, correct.
So did she write these when he was when he was deported to Cambodia?
Some of them when he was in prison. Yeah. And some of them just right after he got deported. I didn't know about her until she took my classes.
Oh.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about your project then?
Okay. So Invisible, the bulk of filming will be done in Southeast Asia. Now, if you've been to Cambodia or Laos or Vietnam, there's funding gets a bit tricky because you do have to pay what we call user fees. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So raising money to make sure that you have non-restricted funds is really important. Now, what I meant by user fees is that in Cambodia, for example, in order to get things done, you have to pay. In Laos, when I was living in Laos, you pay not to get things done. So, and in Vietnam, you pay, you may get something done. So,
You may.
yeah, you may. So I remember I was, when I went back and I led a team of researchers, mostly PhD students, and so I got this fancy, mobile phone, right? And in order to pay my phone bill, I have to pay the guy to process my phone bill. And it's these fees that makes it, and especially filming, it's going to make it so complicated. And I can't tell my university, oh, by the way, I need to bribe this and give that to make sure that it doesn't work. So that's part of fundraising. Yeah. And definitely we can debut that here in Invisible. I think it'd be fun.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's an honor.